He is called Moscow's last friend in the European Union. If Putin came to Hungary, he would be welcomed with full honors, as a distinguished guest. He is also the most corrupt politician in Europe. Hungary is a small country, with only 10 million people. We live in a different reality. He has his very own Versailles, a private zoo with zebras, and a powerful family clan that took all the fattest pieces of Ukrainian business. Those who love conspiracy theories have a problem. They have to find new ones because the old ones turned out to be true. That's the first problem. He has been in power in Hungary for more than 25 years. I am the longest-serving opposition leader in Europe. In 1998, when he became prime minister, he was only 35 years old. Now he is 62. For 15 years, we in Hungary stood against the liberal waves. We were like an island of difference in an ocean of liberals. During this time, he gained many similar supporters around the world, including US President J.D. Vance and Prime Minister Georgi Kabachidze. US President Donald Trump calls him smart and tough, and many of his supporters adore him for his opposition to the culture of Lavadia. America is a big country, Hungary is small, but we are similar in one respect. We are both sovereign countries. In his long and hypocritical political career, he transformed from a constant defender of a united Europe into a cold, scathing critic of Brussels, ultimately becoming one of the few European leaders who openly sympathized with the bunker. You don't have to particularly like the Russians, but you do have to reach an understanding with them. Under his leadership, Germany, which once dreamed of transformation and democracy, eventually became a showcase for oligarchic capitalism, where every major deal bears the unmistakable stamp of the family, and the country's top oligarch is, in fact, its leader. Opponents are convinced that their prime minister was long ago recruited by the FSB and does not serve the interests of the citizens, but mainly those of the Kremlin and his own. And that's all. How is this possible? We are all, for the most part, fighting for a place in Sangir. So how did Viktor Orban turn into a pro-Russian politician and a Democrat into a facsimile of the Bulba Fira of the citizens, becoming a puppet who pulls the strings? All the answers are already here. A difficult childhood in the provinces, the church and the system. All this has notably and significantly shaped Viktor's character, but at the same time, it ultimately created deep inferiority complexes and vanity. The desire to become famous, successful, and of course, influential. We have a strategy. This is my job. There's no need to start wars with everyone who could be an important partner for the economy. Orban learned to adapt from childhood. Even at school, in an environment where the Communist Youth League decided everything, Viktor quickly realized that he shouldn't fight the government, but rather that it was much wiser to please it, or even better, simply leave it alone. That is how he eventually became the secretary of the local Komsomol and, after some time, also joined the army. Orban later recalled that it was, in fact, the army that fundamentally changed his communist views. There were 100 important lessons learned from the environment. For what? Then came university, where after participating in September, in the year 1988, Orban, along with several other close allies and fellow students, founded the Union of Young Democrats, which is also known as Fidesz, an organization that still exists and remains active today. The young team dreamed of reforming the country, so Orban's party easily entered parliament. We want Hungarians to live like people in the European Union. Viktor gained national popularity after a powerful and forceful speech in June 1989. This happened at the solemn reburial ceremony of several notable Hungarian political figures who were put to death in the year 1958 and who had tried to overthrow the communist regime. In his speech, Orban demanded free elections and the withdrawal of Soviet troops from the country. A smart boy will go far. After some time, Orban restructured Fidesz. Thus, from a liberal democratic party that had grown out of a student movement, the party was transformed into a right-wing conservative machine. God, nation, family. These words became the mantra of Viktor Orban's new era. We will listen to everyone, calmly respond to everyone, and then we will do what is in the interest of the Hungarian people. At the age of 35, Viktor Orban became the youngest prime minister in the country. After he became the head of the republic, he gradually, but also quite steadily, began to change the rules of the game. New and completely undemocratic laws were set to be introduced, together with increased control over the media, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and ultimately, everything else. Subtitles by Dima Torzak. Are you breathing less than before? That's truly terrible. Orban's entire activism is increasingly aimed less at protecting the interests of Hungarians than at creating the image of a common enemy. Moreover, Viktor finds this enemy not among bloody dictatorships, but right within his own democratic home, the European Union. We are joining a European family, and it turns out to be an LGBT family, where instead of a mother and father, a girl is forced to live with her parents in concentration camps. The FI did not agree with sodomy, so Brussels and I are not on the same page. We immediately begin the process of withdrawing from the European Union. Over time, Viktor Orban would pay for his great torment, and in the year 2002 he lost power as prime minister. However, 8 years later he would regain the post of prime minister. After practically open doors to parliament, and in order not to repeat the mistakes of the past, Orban takes radical and decisive measures. To strengthen his power, his first order of business is to rewrite the constitution. I wonder, did he and Putin share the game? When I returned to power in 2010, I made a deal with Putin. Instead of focusing on history, we decided to establish normal cooperation that would be economically beneficial, and it worked. The Russians always keep their word. Throughout his career, Orban managed to lead into the wilderness many times. But when he truly believed that he could finally leave the world of politics behind for good, and all of his trusted allies and close colleagues lifted him up and supported him, his loving family eventually came to his rescue. They were always pleased with his shady dealings. Because someone who doesn't spend time with his family is not a real man. The Orban family is like a real mafia, where politics and business are intertwined. And although the Prime Minister likes to talk about traditional Christian values, virtue, asceticism, and spiritual wealth, his family primarily chooses material wealth with yachts and palaces and beautiful villas located on the stunning Adriatic Sea. There are several different motivations behind this. The first and perhaps most obvious is money. For 39 years, Viktor Orban has been married to Anniko Levy, a woman who generally keeps a low profile in public, but who plays a very important and significant role in their extensive family business empire. She is an ambassador and a patriot in humanitarian projects. Viktor and Anniko have 5 children together, forming a loving family. Orban's eldest daughter, Rahel, is listed by Forbes as one of the most influential women in Hungary, which highlights her significant impact. She receives opportunities and achieves success. Hungarians still remember the beautiful wedding of the eldest daughter, an event that was widely discussed. For a country where the average salary just barely manages to reach the European minimum, a wedding with public government vehicles, significant security, and closed roads felt like a slap in the face. How do you even raise a toast to the king? Sorry, don't be troublemakers. Activists wrote "Royal Saint" on the walls of the church where the ceremony was held that night. The graffiti had to be thoroughly cleaned up within just a single day, and the road leading to the church was promptly and carefully repaired. Of course, at the state's expense. Gritty Billy was a pirate. In fact, people didn't like Billy. Do you think the public was deceived? Not at all, not in any way. Moreover, upon returning to his wife, they uncovered a new stage in the Adams family's corruption and marked the beginning of the history of nepotism. After the birth, as part of the birth, the power and influence of the German prime minister, the company of Orban's son, István Tiborgs, eventually became a regular winner in government tenders. At the same time, the companies of Orban's other son, Gaspar, were also unaffected by us and continued to rake in profits. The family grew and grew within these frameworks. Rachel and the son, Santivan Tiborgs, became part of Hungary's elite and one of the richest men in the country. He is also an old pirate, very cunning, rather dirty, and will do almost anything for money. He even has a fork. He owns dozens of different companies and various investments, a prestigious boat club, and a hotel in Budapest, which he bought with money from taxes paid by banks loyal to Orban. The Hungarians regarded him as the beloved son of the country. For me, nothing is impossible. But what about ordinary Hungarian people and the country of Hungary itself? Things are not so beautiful or promising there. The country is considered one of the worst in the European Union. Overall earnings are falling when compared to European standards. Young people are leaving en masse for Germany and Austria. Wages are getting worse, factories are closing, while Orban's authorities and their status only keep growing. He was a very young, promising new prime minister. You really could have a conversation with him. This cheerful, interesting guy turned out to be someone with the same passion for power and the same synchronicity. Investigative journalists checked and directly demonstrated in the summer the connection between Orban's success, the business empire, and budget finances. But people tolerate this, remain quiet and inactive. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's clan is growing rapidly and swimming in fortune. What are you becoming, you ask? You're becoming like a woman. His lifestyle is the envy even of Arab sheikhs, but it keeps Yanukovych's victim awake at night. After all, in his luck and poor taste, it reminds Fedorovich so much of the lost Mezhihirya, like the Pampas, only with zebras instead of islands. How could such corruption have grown in a democratic, law-abiding, EU-oriented country? It's simply and utterly incomprehensible. Oh well, it seems that even their own government agencies have now been completely sidelined. What does Brussels think about this? According to several European media sources, companies that are linked to the Prime Minister's family have consistently benefited, over time, from projects that are funded by the European budget. Viktor Orban recently decided to buy land, more than 90 hectares of vineyard from her mother. Her husband personally handled the sale process on behalf of the Prime Minister's daughter. According to the current regulations, only individuals who are officially recognized as farmers are allowed to purchase agricultural land. Viktor Orban was specifically registered as a farmer in the year 2021, which made her eligible to buy the land under these rules. Seriously, no farmer except his daughter lives on a farm with zebras and mirrors. How could anyone refuse something like that? The living space is about 6,000 square meters. Marble staircases, palm garden, a church, a private power station, fountains, a panda, a library, and reception rooms. And dungeons. And elevators that offer convenient access down to the beaches, and then there's an expensive plastic beach that's heated in order to get rid of the snow cover. Even Master Orban, the official bunker resident, with his lamp in the palace in Gelendzhik, could be deceived. Take a look at this photo. From the impressive buildings, taken by one of the workers. Something here looks a bit unusual. You've seen this somewhere before. Here is the classic famous scene from Sergei Eisenstein's Storming the Winter Beach. In fact, you can still see this iconic spire today if you come to the beautiful city of St. Petersburg and approach the impressive cathedral. And the fact that President Putin installed an exact replica of the Tsar's spire and the winter beach on the doors of his personal dacha says a great deal about who this man is, whom he considers his wife and master, and the details of the vertical in the Austro-Hungarian imperial style. And the Prime Minister's official bank account indicates a balance of only 14,000 euros. He somehow always manages to get away with it, every single time. After all, Viktor has long understood exactly what it truly means to carefully and thoughtfully administer the law. According to the opposition, Orban has almost every judge in the country under his thumb. He managed to create a sort of Belarus within what was supposed to be democratic Germany, happily restored the church and embraced the mantle of dictatorship on the gears. And when a person possesses absolute power and intolerance, all kinds of imperialist ideas start to form in their mind. We could organize the disintegration of Ukraine in a single day, in just one day, but that is not in our interest. Another native of the land, though this time not Russian, but rather Austro-Hungarian, hailing from the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, in the year 2014, during the period of Russian aggression, Orban publicly demanded freedom and autonomy for the Hungarians of Transcarpathia. This very situation, in fact, became the single biggest stumbling block in diplomatic relations with Ukraine. The Hungarians living in the Carpathian region have the right to dual citizenship, the right to official status, and the right to freedom as well. The situation of the 200,000 Hungarians living in Ukraine makes this especially tense. Thanks to Viktor Orban, about 100,000 ethnic Ukrainians in Transcarpathia receive passports through this improvement. Of course, the wise Ukrainian beadle did not give EU passports to Ukrainians without a reason. They are extremely important to him as potential and future voters. In the year 2015, Orban's wife publicly supported her husband's idea and officially opened a representative office of the Humanitarian Ukrainian Foundation in the region of Transcarpathia. The city of Hungary will do everything it possibly can to fully support the needs and aspirations of Ukrainian autonomy in Transcarpathia. In response to adapting the right to education for Ukrainians, Germany announced that this would block Ukraine from further integration into the EU and NATO. This remains the case today. Just like Ukraine, Ukraine has no other tools than to block international European and Euro-Atlantic goals. After all, it is truly difficult to maintain a balance between Moscow and Brussels. That is why Orban is trying to sit on two chairs at once, so as not to lose any trophies. And I want to save Ukraine from a situation where, being in a federal system with Ukrainians, if we bring them in, we will also be at war with the Russians. If you are in a federal system with someone and you are attacked, sooner or later you will have soldiers involved, and we do not want to die for Ukraine. Orban is constantly critical of Europe for its relationship with Putin, even before the full invasion of Ukraine. When the Bolotnaya Reichsburg was already exchanging near the border, the honorary politician was not at the top, stepping into the hands of the Kremlin. When the very first Russian tanks crossed over the Ukrainian border, Viktor Orban made the decision to become a symbol of peace. The ongoing war between these two Slavic peoples is extremely brutal and devastating, but also relatives, both Russian and Ukrainian. This became obvious at a time when the Ukrainian Hippocrates knew about the previous war from the very beginning. Putin personally blamed Orban for the war with Ukraine. At the same time, the two-faced Viktor himself was waiting for the moment when he could take Transcarpathia for himself. Neither Europeans nor Ukrainians will be able to work with the Russians. Unexpectedly, Ukrainian soldiers gave the occupiers a hard time, and Orban, who was recruiting an FSB agent, quickly received his equipment. On the one hand, he supports the Ukrainian government and territorial integrity, but on the other hand, he criticizes the European Union for supporting Ukraine and does everything he can to prevent and block sanctions against Russia. But the longer the war goes on, the harder it is for Orban to maintain his relationship with the Kremlin's leader. That's why the Prime Minister presents his good relations with Putin as both a danger to ordinary Ukrainians and a guarantee of cheap Russian energy resources for his consumers. If Germany were to disconnect from Russian oil and natural gas, the country would immediately experience a 4% contraction in GDP. That would be catastrophic. It would mean that the German economy would be brought to its knees. Orban maneuvered like a fish in a food tank, trying to prove to everyone that he was an unknown trump card. But there's no point in hiding Hungary's dependence in Russian hands. More and more people are realizing that Orban is just another Putin puppet like Lukashenko. Just a bit more refined and meticulously polished, truly impressive, and with slightly better European manners. So just like Prime Minister Orban, he is often accused of some kind of anti-Russian stance. That's hatred. He's not anti-Russian, he's not an anti-Russian politician at all, he is in fact very much anti-Russian. The ongoing fight for money and Putin's cheap oil is far more important to Viktor Orban than the fight for peace and stability. In the year 2023, he publicly called on NATO not to invite Ukraine into the alliance, to lower the demands regarding the return of Crimea, and to end military support. They should stop supporting the military in Ukraine. This is the only way to save Ukraine, since it will run out of soldiers before Russia does. In September 2024, yet another scandal broke out in Germany, suggesting corruption within Orban's inner circle. His former ally publicly released an official archive, in which his ex-wife and a former government minister accused members of the cabinet of document forgery. But once again, this failed to undermine the mafia-like position of the Prime Minister. Ideological ties are even more important here because over the past decade and a half, Viktor Orban has entered into increasingly serious and escalating conflicts with Eastern countries and has sought allies elsewhere. You can see how he uses ideological Christian nationalism, the same elements that Vladimir Putin also uses. Over the years of his rule, the Hungarian Prime Minister has built a monumental foundation for his power. Essentially, it is based on hundreds of loyal businessmen, each of whom owes their power solely to their godfather, Don Orban, my crew, father. And although in Europe he is most often called the most corrupt politician on the continent, in Hungary he remains one of the locals. Someone who protects Hungarians from the corrupting influence of the East and other terrible enemies created by the lion tamer himself, the puppeteer. Strange leaders will create peace. Touchy and overly sensitive leaders often start wars. It's really just that simple. And yet, on the eve of the next elections, not everything is rosy for Viktor Orban. His biggest and most serious problem is the catastrophic state of the Hungarian economy. Meanwhile, the cunning Prime Minister doesn't want to steal less, but he can ensure a better standard of living for his own parents. A Shia outsider. His whole family protested against him, but he couldn't help himself and kept stealing. I would like to kindly remind you that this particular video has been created solely for entertainment purposes, and it contains various elements of satire as well as irony. Please note that all facts, statements, and events are presented in a deliberately hyperbolic or exaggerated form, specifically for comedic or dramatic effect. We do not mean to cast doubt, but merely emphasize the humor. Please take this with a smile.